Our hearing today is titled A Rational Discussion of Climate Change, the Science, the Evidence, and the Response. The purpose of today's hearing is to conduct an objective review of the science behind the greenhouse effect, climate change, and ocean acidification. My impression has been for some time that many members of the public and perhaps some in Congress have never had the opportunity to consider the basic science and, for that matter, the long history of investigation and data that underlie scientific understanding of the greenhouse effect and, more recently, of ocean acidification. Therefore, today we have three panels of experts with us. The first will begin today's hearing by setting the foundation of basic science. They will explain to us the fundamental physics and chemistry underlying the role of CO2 and other atmospheric gases in regulating or altering our planet's temperature and the acidity of the oceans. A bit of scientific history lesson will be included as we learn that the science behind this issue goes back more than 100 years. The panel will also address questions about how much CO2 has been entering the atmosphere, from what sources, and with what predicted effects. From basic scientific findings and methodologies described by the first panel, we will then consider whether or not the predicted impacts of CO2 on temperature and ocean acidity are in fact occurring. In other words, we will ask the question, if basic science makes certain predictions about what should happen if CO2 levels increase in the air and oceans, what is actually happening in the real world, how do we know if it's happening or not, and what can we predict for the future? The third and final panel will then discuss the impacts that are being observed and that can be anticipated from climate change and ocean acidification. Our witnesses will discuss how we are already responding today and actions we need to take to prepare for the future. The analysis includes such matters as national security, social impacts, economic effects, and health concerns, among others. I've had the opportunity in preparation for this hearing to read all of the written testimony. I want to thank the witnesses for taking time from their busy schedules to prepare this material and submit it beforehand for the committee analysis. We are also going to post that on the Science Committee website for those of you who are interested, and I hope you will be. It's wonderful testimony and very illuminating. Before we hear from the witnesses, I want to make just a few key points. Having taught scientific methodology and basic statistics, and having published myself in peer-reviewed journals, I personally place a paramount importance on scientific integrity. That is why, in the American Competes Act, I authored the provision that insists that institutions seeking to receive NSF funding have specific course training in scientific ethics. My understanding is from academia and from NSF that this is having a salutary impact, and I'm proud of that impact. I mention it today because, after all, this is the Science and Technology Committee. We must, if we are to have any credibility at all, insist that our witnesses adhere to the highest standards of integrity, and simultaneously, we members of Congress must hold ourselves and this committee as an institution to that standard in our study of the issues and in our conduct today and in the future. In the context of climate change and ocean acidification, I also believe that our nation is because our nation is the biggest historical producer and second largest current producer of greenhouse gases, we have a profound moral responsibility to be sure we get this right. Scripture teaches us to love thy neighbor as thyself. If our disproportionate impacts on the rest of the world are harming billions of other people and countless other species, we are not living up to that scriptural guidance. Finally, even if one completely rejects the evidence that will be presented today and reports from the National Academies of Science and countless other respected bodies, I believe it still makes good sense to strive for our nation to be a leader in clean energy technology for economic self-interest alone. Is not the reality of sending hundreds of billions of dollars abroad, often to countries with values antithetical to our own, at least a bit troubling for all of us? Is not the national security risk this creates disconcerting? Are the known impacts, such as Exxon Valdez, the Gulf oil spill, and numerous other events, not of sufficient concern to argue of change? And are not the facts of red alert days in our nation's cities in which it's unsafe for our children to breathe sufficient cause for some degree of consternation and change? I personally believe the evidence of climate change and ocean acidification is compelling and troubling. But even without that conclusion, I'm convinced we must change our energy policies for reasons of economics, national security, and environmental and human health. Our nation has long been a leader in renewable energy technology, and I believe we must remain a leader. This committee, under the leadership of Chairman Gordon and before him Chairman Bullard, have taken positive steps to ensure that continues. So, too, we've been at the forefront of climate research and should remain a leader there as well. We must continue this endeavor if we intend to leave our children and our grandchildren a strong economy and truly independent and secure nation and an environment in which to live, work, and play. Finally, as the parent of 5-and-a-half-year-old twin boys, the whole effort of my service in Congress and on this committee has been to ensure that they have a brighter and better future. If we don't address this issue well and responsibly, I fear we will fail in that mission and leave them a much less pleasant future than we've been able to enjoy. I'm excited about today's hearing and these three panels of witnesses. I thank them for their time. They will help us better understand the concepts and impacts of climate change. And I personally thank each of you for being here, and I thank our outstanding committee staff for their work in bringing such superb witnesses.